All right, welcome to the second video, an example for section 3.4. So now that you got to see an example and answer some questions using the quadratic formula, I want to show you a couple other examples that have some slightly different answers. So one thing we've learned already through quadratics is that quadratics can have up to two solutions. So that means they can have two solutions like the first example did, or they could have one single solution, or you may have no real solutions, in which case you have imaginary solutions. So those are all three possible scenarios when using the quadratic formula. So just because you come up with a single answer does not mean you did things incorrectly, or if you get an imaginary answer. Those are all perfectly acceptable results for solving a quadratic equation. So you want to keep that in mind. Again, the key is to make sure that you are doing your work slowly and going through it one step at a time. So let's look at this, this example. So again, we're going to use the quadratic formula. So you should have it in your notes, but in case you don't have it in your notes already, go ahead and pause it and just write it down here. X equals negative b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. All right, so what you'll notice first is that we've got a quadratic, but this is not in standard form right now. The right-hand side is not equal to 0, and all of our terms are not on the left-hand side. So the first thing we need to do is take our equation and put it in standard form. So what that's going to involve is rearranging these terms so that they're all on the left and then writing them in order from greatest exponent down to the least. So let's go ahead and do that right now. What we're going to get when we do that is we subtract 12x and add 4. So we get 25x squared minus 20x plus 4. And our a value is 25, b is negative 20, and c is 4. Okay, the sign always goes with your term as well. So the b is not 20, it's negative 20, and c is positive 4. Okay, the sign tells you if it's positive or negative. All right, now that we've got it in standard form, we've got our a, b, and c values. All we do is we take the quadratic formula and we plug our terms in right here. So we plug in negative 20 for b, 25 for a, and c for 4. Now, we always want to start by simplifying what's under the radical first. So 20 squared, negative 20 squared, that's going to give us 400, minus 4 times 25 times 4 is 400. So we get 400 minus 400. That's going to end up giving us 0. So plus or minus the square root of 0. The negatives here turn into a positive, so we get positive 20 plus or minus the square root of 0 all over 2 times 25 is 50. So now, look what happened. If we add 0, we're left with 20, and if we subtract 0, we're left with 20. So when you're radical, when you have a 0 underneath it, that's actually going to go away, and you're just going to be left with one single answer. You're going to be left with, in this case, 20 over 50, which simplifies down to 2 over 5. So what that means, in this case, we only have one solution to this quadratic. Okay? When your radical goes away, you're not adding and subtracting something. You're just left with one fraction. So you have one answer. Okay, now we could take this, and to check it, we can plug it in and graph it. And if you graph this, you'll see when you have one answer, your quadratic, your parabola comes down and just touches the x-intercept at one point. Okay? It does not go through the x-axis, because if it went through the x-axis, you would have two solutions, two x-intercepts. So a graph with only one solution, a quadratic with only one solution, the parabola just comes down or up and touches the x-axis at one single point, which is your solution. Okay? So this is an example of just one solution. Let's look at a another problem here to get some more practice. All right, so here's another problem we're going to solve using the quadratic formula. So negative x squared plus 4x equals 13. Again, we'll notice this is not in standard form right now. So the right-hand side is not equal to 0. So we have to go around and put it in standard form. Now, before we do that, I just want to point out it's completely fine to have a negative sign in front of your x squared. You don't have to move this around to make your a term positive. Okay? We can leave this on our left-hand side and just move the 13 over to get our standard form. Okay? So we just have to be careful that the negative will become part of our a value when we go ahead and figure out our a, b, and c terms. So go ahead and put this into standard form right now. And when you put it in standard form, you should get negative x squared plus 4x minus 13. And our a, b, and c values are negative 1. Remember the negative and the 1, even though there's no number, this is 1x squared. So it's negative 1 for a, 4 for b, and negative 13 for c. So now we take our terms and we plug them into our quadratic equation. So again, b is 4, a is negative 1, and c is negative 13. Now again, look at all these negative signs right here. This can be confusing if you're not using parentheses to keep track of everything. So you want to make sure that you don't lose track of these and make a mistake. So first thing you want to simplify is under your radical. So 4 squared is 16, and we have 4 times negative 1 times negative 13. So we get 4 times 13, which is 52. So we get 16 minus 52, which is going to give us negative 36. Okay, so we've got a negative under our radical. Again, that's completely fine. It means we're going to have imaginary answers. So now we simplify our radical. We have negative 4 plus or minus root negative 36 over negative 2. Now, you always want to simplify your answers, and we just learned in this chapter how to simplify a radical that has a negative underneath it. So we would go ahead and we would simplify root negative 36 into 6i. So this becomes negative 4 plus or minus 6i all over negative 2. Now, we can simplify this further, okay? You'll notice all of our terms here are divisible by 2. Negative 4, 6, and negative 2. So we can divide both sides both terms by negative 2 and simplify it to 2 plus or minus 3i. So this is an example of a quadratic that has an imaginary solution. So what I'm going to put up now, I want you guys to go ahead and answer, use the quadratic formula to solve questions 4, 5, and 6, and go ahead and enter them in the text box now.